Professor Michael Cross was the world's leading expert on xenolinguistics, which is why NASA called him in the middle of the night when Voyager 1 mysteriously returned to Earth carrying an impossible message. The spacecraft that had been humanity's ambassador to the stars for over 4 decades had come back fundamentally changed, its golden record replaced by something that challenged everything Cross thought he knew about language and communication. The symbols covering the new record weren't just alien, they were somehow alive, changing and evolving even as he studied them under the microscope. What terrified Cross most wasn't the alien nature of the script, but how easily he could understand it, as if the knowledge was being directly implanted in his mind. The message was simple, but devastating. Warning to Earth. The golden record was received by the harvesters of dead worlds. They have been traveling toward your system for 40 years. Your music and voices have shown them that your planet is ripe for consumption. This record was sent back by the last survivors of Kepler 438b as a final act of mercy. Cross realized that humanity's greatest attempt at communication had become our death sentence, and the beings who received our message were already on their way. But that revelation came later, after days of sleepless analysis in the sterile halls of JPL. Right now, at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in Pasadena, Cross was stumbling through his apartment in boxers and a ratty Berkeley sweatshirt, phone pressed to his ear while director Harrison Webb's voice crackled through static. "Michael, I need you here. Now." Webb's usual bureaucratic composure had cracked. "We've got a situation that's... Christ, I don't even know how to describe it." Cross found his jeans draped over a chair, stepping into them while balancing the phone. "What kind of situation requires a xenolinguist at 4 in the morning, Harrison?" "The kind where an object that's supposed to be 12 billion miles away just appeared on our doorstep." Through his apartment window, Los Angeles sprawled in pre-dawn darkness, ordinary and oblivious. "You're talking about Voyager." "I'm talking about something that looks exactly like Voyager 1, down to every bolt and scratch, except it's carrying cargo it wasn't launched with." Webb's breathing sounded ragged. "Michael, there are symbols on this thing, symbols that seem to shift when you're not looking directly at them." Cross grabbed his keys, already moving toward the door. His expertise had taken him to remote archaeological sites and classified government facilities, but nothing had prepared him for the edge in Webb's voice. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Bring everything. Your entire library of comparative linguistics, pattern recognition software, whatever the hell you use to decode dead languages. Because what we've got here isn't dead." Webb paused. "And Michael, when you see this, don't trust your first instinct about what it means. Sometimes the obvious answer is exactly what they want you to think." The line went dead, leaving Cross standing in his hallway with questions multiplying like cancer cells. The security checkpoint at JPL felt different at this hour, fluorescent lights humming against empty corridors, badge scanners beeping into silence. Cross badged through 3 checkpoints before reaching Building 230, where Webb waited with someone Cross didn't recognize. "Dr. Cross, meet Lieutenant Colonel Jack Brennan from Space Force Intelligence." Webb gestured to a compact man with prematurely grey hair and the kind of handshake that conveyed both strength and restraint. "Jack's been tracking unusual orbital debris for the past 6 months." "Debris?" Cross set his laptop bag down. "I thought we were dealing with Voyager." Brennan's smile held no warmth. "We've been monitoring 17 objects that appeared in our solar system without explanation. Most were small, basketball-sized chunks of what looked like crystallized metal. They'd show up on our deep space arrays, then vanish before we could get a closer look." Webb led them down a hallway Cross had never seen before, past laboratories sealed behind reinforced glass. "Yesterday at 14:32 GMT, our tracking station in Goldstone picked up a massive signature approaching Earth. The radar profile matched Voyager 1 perfectly." "Matched how perfectly?" Cross asked. "Down to the fucking micron," Brennan said. "Same mass, same dimensions, same rotational wobble it developed after 30 years in space. The only difference was its trajectory. This thing wasn't coming from the direction of interstellar space. It came from somewhere else entirely." They stopped at a heavy door marked with biohazard warnings. Webb swiped his badge twice before the locks cycled open. Beyond lay a clean room where technicians in full protective gear worked around a familiar golden disc mounted in a specialized analysis chamber. Cross pressed against the observation window. The object looked exactly like the golden record, the same etched diagrams of hydrogen atoms, mathematical constants, and human figures. But something was wrong with the surface. The familiar engraving seemed to shift slightly when he focused on different sections, like heat mirages on summer asphalt. "We pulled it off the spacecraft 2 hours ago," Webb explained. "The moment our team removed it from Voyager's mounting bracket, the symbols started changing." A technician inside the clean room looked up and gave Webb a thumbs up. Through the intercom, his voice crackled. "Pattern cycle complete. Ready for linguistic analysis." Cross studied the disc more carefully. What he'd initially mistaken for the original golden record bore only superficial resemblance to humanity's message. The mathematical sequences were different, more complex, involving concepts that made his head pound just trying to process them. The human figures had been replaced by something else entirely. "Jesus Christ," Cross whispered. "That's not our record." "No shit, Professor." Brennan's tone carried bitter satisfaction. "Which brings us to the big question. Where the hell is the original? And who sent this back in its place?" Webb activated a computer terminal beside the observation window. "We've been recording the symbol changes for the past 4 hours. Watch this." The screen showed time-lapse footage of the disk's surface. The alien script flowed across the metal like living text, characters forming and reforming in patterns that seemed almost musical. Cross found himself leaning closer, mesmerized by the flowing transitions. "It's beautiful," he murmured, then caught himself. Professional detachment. That's what this situation required. I mean, the mathematical elegance of the transformations suggests an incredibly sophisticated encryption method. "Or it's trying to communicate," Brennan said. "Our cryptographers ran every code-breaking algorithm we have. Nothing. That's why Webb called you." Cross watched another cycle of transformations. Each time the symbols shifted, he felt something tugging at the edges of his consciousness, like trying to remember a word on the tip of his tongue. "I'll need to study the patterns more closely." "How long do the cycles last?" "Anywhere from 90 seconds to 12 minutes, Webb answered. "No apparent pattern to the timing." "What about the spacecraft itself? Any other modifications?" Brennan and Webb exchanged glances. "That's where things get interesting," Brennan said. "Voyager 1 is in perfect condition. Better than perfect, actually. Components that should have failed decades ago are functioning like new. The power source is operating at 100% efficiency." "That's impossible. The radioisotope thermoelectric generators should be nearly depleted by now." "Should be," Webb agreed, "but they're not. It's as if someone took our 47-year-old spacecraft and restored it to factory specifications. Except for one small detail." Cross waited. "The interior is lined with the same crystalline material we found in those debris fragments," Brennan continued. "It's growing. Slowly, but definitely expanding outward from the record mounting bracket." Through the observation window, Cross watched the technicians preparing the disk for transport to a different analysis chamber. One of them paused, touching his helmet, as if trying to ease a headache. "How many people have been exposed to direct visual contact with the record?" Cross asked. "Maybe 20, Webb replied. "Why?" Cross noted how the technicians' movements had become slower, more deliberate. "I think we should limit exposure time, just a precaution." "You think it's dangerous?" "I think," Cross said, "that something traveled a very long way to return this message to us. And given the effort involved, we'd be fools to assume it came with good intentions." The technician in the clean room stumbled, catching himself against the analysis chamber. The technician collapsed 20 minutes later. Cross watched through the observation window as 2 medics carried out David Kim, a specialist who'd been working with deep space artifacts for 15 years. Kim's eyes rolled back, showing only white, while his lips moved in silent repetition of sounds that resembled no human language. Third case in 6 hours, Dr. Raymond Foster announced, emerging from the medical bay with a clipboard full of increasingly disturbing symptoms. Foster ran JPL's Occupational Health Division and looked like he hadn't slept in days. First, we had Martinez reporting severe migraines and temporary blindness. Then Johnson started speaking in mathematical equations during his lunch break. Now Kim. Webb rubbed his temples. What's their condition? Stable, but... Foster hesitated. They're all exhibiting similar neurological patterns. Heightened activity in the language processing centers, specifically Broca's and Wernicke's areas. It's like their brains are being rewired for communication protocols they shouldn't be able to understand. How long were they exposed to the disc? Martinez was in there for 45 minutes during initial documentation. Johnson managed the extraction, maybe 20 minutes of direct visual contact. Kim was running spectral analysis for just over an hour. Brennan leaned against the wall, his expression grim. "Professor, we need answers. My superiors are asking questions I can't answer, and the Russians are picking up chatter about unusual space activity. We've got maybe 12 hours before this becomes an international incident." Cross nodded, already formulating an approach. "I need access to the disk, but with strict safety protocols. 30-minute exposure windows maximum, with neurological monitoring." "Done," Webb said. "What else?" "I want to examine the original Voyager data, flight logs, trajectory calculations, anything that might explain how it traveled back to Earth." Cross paused. "And I need to speak with the affected personnel." Foster shook his head immediately. "Absolutely not. They're in medical isolation." "Doctor, those men might have information crucial to understanding this phenomenon. Their altered brain states could be providing insights we can't access through conventional analysis." "Or they could be completely delusional," Foster countered. "Then let me be the judge of that." 40 minutes later, Cross sat across from Johnson in a sterile medical bay. The spacecraft engineer appeared lucid, but something fundamental had changed behind his eyes. When he spoke, his words carried an odd rhythm, as if he were translating thoughts from another language. "The symbols aren't random," Johnson said without preamble. "They're a countdown sequence, but not temporal, spatial. They're marking the approach of something massive." Cross activated a small recording device. "What kind of approach?" "Harvesting fleet, 17 vessels, each the size of Manhattan. They've been traveling toward us for 40 Earth years, following the Golden Record's transmission path like a beacon." Johnson's voice remained steady, clinical. "The original record was received by a dying civilization on Kepler 438b. They had just enough time to send back a warning before their world was consumed." The hair on Cross's neck stood up. "Consumed by what?" "Beings that feed on inhabited worlds. They follow electromagnetic signatures, radio broadcasts, television signals, music. The richer the cultural output, the more attractive the planet becomes." Johnson turned to stare directly at Cross, and for a moment his expression held infinite sadness. "We called out to the universe, Professor. We told them exactly where to find us." Cross leaned forward. "The disk, what exactly is it telling us? Warning, instructions, preparation protocols." Johnson's hands began moving in precise geometric patterns, as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "The survivors of Kepler 438b modified our probe's trajectory and replaced the Golden Record with everything they learned about the harvesters' methods. How they scout worlds, how they process populations, how they ensure nothing useful escapes." "Jesus Christ," Cross whispered. "How long do we have?" Johnson's expression went blank for several seconds, as if accessing information from a distant source. "The lead scout vessel entered our solar system 6 days ago. It's been observing, cataloguing our communication networks, mapping population centers. The main fleet will arrive in 37 days. Cross's mouth went dry. "Can we stop them?" "The Kepler survivors included countermeasure data, but implementing their suggestions would require..." Johnson struggled with the words. "Would require sacrifices most civilizations aren't willing to make." Before Cross could ask what that meant, Johnson began convulsing. Foster rushed in, injecting something into the patient's arm that brought the seizure under control, but Johnson's eyes had rolled back again, showing only white. Cross returned to the observation deck where Brennan and Webb waited with increasingly urgent expressions. "Well," Webb demanded. Cross chose his words carefully. "We're dealing with a genuine extraterrestrial intelligence, but not the kind we hope to encounter. According to Johnson, our golden record was received by a dying alien civilization that managed to send back a warning about something called harvesters." Brennan's expression darkened. "Harvesters of what?" "Inhabited worlds. They apparently use electromagnetic signatures to locate planets with developed civilizations then." Cross struggled with the implications. "Johnson claims they consume entire biospheres. And you believe a man who's been speaking in equations and geometric patterns?" "I believe the evidence. The modified Voyager, the crystalline growths, the neurological changes in exposed personnel. Something is definitely using our own technology to communicate with us, and the message isn't friendly." Webb activated his secure phone. "I need to brief the administrator immediately. How long do we have to verify this information?" "If Johnson's timeline is accurate, about 5 weeks." Brennan stepped closer to the observation window, studying the disk that continued its hypnotic symbol shifts. "What kind of countermeasures are we talking about?" Cross watched the alien script flow across the metal surface like living poetry. Each transformation seemed to pull at something deep in his consciousness, offering understanding if he would just stop resisting and let the knowledge flow freely. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I suspect we're going to need more than conventional weapons." Through the cleanroom window, the disk completed another transformation cycle. For just a moment, Cross could swear he saw human faces reflected in its surface, not the etched figures from the original golden record, but real faces, twisted in expressions of absolute terror. Foster's voice crackled over the intercom. "Professor Cross, we've got a problem. Martinez is awake, and he's asking for you specifically. He says the disk told him your name." "How the hell would an alien artifact know who I am?" "Maybe," Brennan said grimly, "because whoever sent it has been studying us longer than we think." In the medical bay, alarms began sounding as Kim's vital signs spiked beyond normal parameters. Through the speakers, his voice carried clearly, "They're coming." The music made them hungry. God help us, we taught them exactly how to find us. The facility fell into an eerie quiet around 2 a.m. After 12 hours of constant activity, medical emergencies, briefings with Washington, encrypted calls to observatories worldwide, the sudden stillness felt almost oppressive. Cross sat alone in the analysis chamber, finally granted direct access to the alien disk under strict medical supervision. Dr. Foster monitored his vital signs from the adjacent room, while Brennan watched through reinforced glass with obvious skepticism. Webb had left an hour ago for an emergency video conference with NASA's top brass, leaving Cross with explicit instructions to decode the warning before dawn. 30 minutes maximum exposure, Foster's voice crackled through the intercom. "First sign of neurological abnormality, we pull you out." Cross nodded, adjusting the high-powered magnification array focused on the disk's surface. Up close, the alien script was even more mesmerizing. The symbols didn't just change, they seemed to respond to his attention, flowing toward whatever section he studied most intently. "This is fascinating," he murmured, activating his recording equipment. "The glyphs appear to be following my eye movements. It's as if the message is tailoring itself to my specific attention patterns." "Professor," Brennan's voice held a warning edge, "remember what happened to the others?" Cross forced himself to look away from the disk periodically, but each break became more difficult. The symbols were starting to make sense, not through translation, but through direct comprehension. Mathematical relationships that should have taken hours to decode revealed themselves instantly. "I'm getting coherent data streams," he reported. "Star charts, chemical formulas, what looks like genetic sequences. This isn't just a warning, it's a comprehensive intelligence briefing about the harvester's capabilities." 20 minutes into the session, Cross understood why the affected technicians had suffered neurological episodes. The information wasn't being communicated through normal sensory channels. It was being downloaded directly into his consciousness, bypassing natural cognitive filters. The harvesters weren't just predators, they were farmers. They cultivated civilizations across the galaxy, monitoring their electromagnetic emissions until technological development reached optimal harvest levels. Worlds with rich cultural output, complex communication networks, and diverse biological resources attracted them like ripe fruit. "My God," Cross breathed. "They've been doing this for millions of years. Entire galactic regions stripped clean, converted into resource nodes for their expansion." The harvesters didn't just consume planets, they preserved the inhabitants' consciousness during the harvesting process, integrating billions of minds into their collective intelligence. Every civilization they destroyed still existed within their vast neural network, forced to guide future harvests with their accumulated knowledge. "Professor, your vitals are spiking," Foster warned. "Blood pressure's up 30%. Cross ignored him, transfixed by the flowing script. The survivors of Kepler 438b had included detailed information about the harvesters' scout protocols. The lead vessel currently in their solar system was analyzing Earth's communication infrastructure, mapping satellite networks, identifying key population centers. It was also doing something else, something that made Cross's stomach turn. The scout was broadcasting modified human signals back toward Earth, testing how quickly humanity could adapt to alien communication methods. Every person who'd been exposed to the disk was part of this test. The harvesters were measuring their species' cognitive flexibility, determining how efficiently human minds could be integrated into their collective. "Jesus Christ," Cross whispered. "We're not just being hunted. We're being evaluated for assimilation." "Time's up, Professor," Foster announced. "We're pulling you out." "Wait, there's more." "I'm starting to understand the countermeasures." The laboratory lights flickered and died. Emergency illumination kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red light. Through the observation window, Cross saw Brennan reaching for his sidearm as Foster frantically checked his monitoring equipment. "Power grid's down facility-wide," Brennan reported into his radio. "Switching to backup systems." That's when Cross noticed the disk had stopped changing. Its surface displayed a single massive glyph that seemed to pulse with its own light. And for the first time since he'd begun studying it, Cross couldn't understand what it meant. The clean room door burst open as Webb returned, his face pale with panic. "We've got incoming transmissions from the Goldstone array. Something massive just lit up our deep space sensors." "How massive?" Brennan demanded. 17 distinct signatures, each roughly 2 kilometers in length. They're decelerating from 0.7 light speed about 4 billion kilometers out. Webb's voice cracked slightly. "The lead ship is transmitting on every electromagnetic frequency simultaneously." Cross stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "What kind of transmission?" "Music," Webb replied. "Our music. Bach, Mozart, Chuck Berry, everything we put on the original golden record. But it's wrong somehow. Like it's been processed through something that doesn't understand what music is supposed to be." The disc began spinning in its mounting bracket, slowly at first, then faster. The single glyph stretched and distorted, becoming something that made Cross's eyes water to observe directly. "Everyone out!" Foster shouted. "Radiation levels are spiking." But Cross couldn't move. The spinning disc had triggered something in his enhanced consciousness, flooding his mind with information he desperately didn't want to understand. The harvesters weren't just responding to their golden record transmission, they were using it as a template to understand human civilization. Every song, every voice, every piece of cultural data humanity had proudly broadcast into space had been analyzed, categorized, and weaponized. The harvesters now understood exactly how to communicate with humans, how to manipulate their emotions, how to break down their psychological defenses. And Cross realized with mounting horror that his own expertise in xenolinguistics had made him the perfect test subject. His brain was naturally adapted to process foreign communication systems, which meant the alien download had been far more complete than anyone realized. "Professor Cross!" Brennan grabbed his arm. "We need to evacuate." Cross allowed himself to be pulled toward the exit, but he could still feel the disk's influence tugging at his consciousness. The spinning had created some kind of resonance frequency that continued vibrating in his skull even after the clean room door sealed behind them. "The countermeasures," he gasped as they rushed down the corridor. The Kepler survivors included instructions for resistance, but implementing them requires... His words cut off as Martinez appeared at the end of the hallway. The technician had escaped from medical isolation, but he was no longer entirely human. His skin held a translucent quality that revealed flowing patterns of light beneath the surface, the same geometric forms that had been dancing across the disk. When he spoke, his voice harmonized with itself in impossible ways. "Professor Cross," Martinez said, "the collective is ready to receive your full integration. Your linguistic expertise will help us communicate more effectively with your species during the transition period." Brennan drew his pistol. "Martinez, stand down. You're suffering from alien contamination. We can help you." Martinez tilted his head with predatory curiosity. "Lieutenant Colonel Brennan, your resistance profiles have been noted. You will make an excellent addition to our tactical analysis division." The transformed technician raised his hand, and Cross felt something terrible reaching into his mind. Not communication this time, but domination. The downloaded alien knowledge began asserting control over his cognitive processes. "Fight it!" Webb shouted, but Cross could feel his consciousness fragmenting. That's when he understood the final, devastating truth. The disk hadn't just been downloading information about the harvesters. It had been uploading data about humanity directly to their fleet. Every moment he'd spent studying the alien script, every thought he'd processed, every linguistic insight he'd developed, all of it had been transmitted back to the approaching ships. His expertise hadn't made him humanity's best hope for understanding the threat. It had made him their unwitting collaborator. Brennan fired 3 shots center mass. Martinez staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he smiled with genuine warmth. "Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Your projectile weapons data has been catalogued. The harvest will proceed more efficiently now." Cross screamed as the alien presence in his mind surged toward complete control. Brennan's 4th shot took Martinez in the head. The transformed technician collapsed, but the translucent patterns beneath his skin continued pulsing for another 30 seconds before finally going dark. Cross felt the alien presence in his mind recede slightly, like a tide pulling back, but leaving debris scattered across the beach of his consciousness. "Medical bay, now," Foster ordered, already injecting Cross with something that made his vision blur around the edges. "We need to assess the contamination level before you become like Martinez." They dragged Cross through corridors filled with emergency personnel evacuating the facility. Through a window, he glimpsed the parking lot where military vehicles were establishing a perimeter. Someone had made the call to treat JPL as a potential ground zero for extraterrestrial contact. "How many others?" Webb asked Foster as they reached the medical wing. "Johnson and Kim are stable but completely unresponsive. Martinez was the only one who achieved full integration." Foster checked Cross's pupils with a penlight. "Professor, can you understand me?" Cross nodded, though speaking required significant effort. The alien knowledge remained accessible in his mind, but now it felt like trying to read a book while someone else held the pages. "The integration process, it's not instantaneous. There's a window where partial subjects can still resist." "How long?" Brennan demanded. "Maybe 6 hours, maybe less." Cross accepted the sedative Foster offered, knowing he needed to stay coherent despite the chemical fog. "But that's not our biggest problem. The scout ship is using us as living transmitters. Every person who's been exposed to the disk is now broadcasting human intelligence directly to the harvester fleet." Webb's face went ashen. "Broadcasting what exactly?" "Everything we know about Earth's defenses, population centers, technological capabilities. Our entire species' survival strategies laid bare." Cross struggled to focus as the medication took effect. "The bastards turned our first contact protocols into a reconnaissance mission." Foster pulled up Martinez's brain scans on a wall monitor. The neural activity patterns looked like nothing in medical literature, geometric forms that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. "Professor, based on what you've absorbed from the disk, is there any way to reverse the integration process?" Cross accessed the alien data stream, wincing as foreign concepts scraped against his human neural pathways. The Kepler survivors included countermeasure protocols, but... He paused, processing information that made him physically ill. They require targeted electromagnetic pulse therapy that would effectively lobotomize the affected subjects. Lobotomize? Webb stepped closer. You mean permanent brain damage? I mean complete erasure of the integrated alien consciousness, along with significant portions of human memory and cognitive function. Cross met their stares with grim honesty. The subjects would survive, but they'd be essentially reduced to the mental capacity of children. Brennan holstered his weapon, his expression calculating. How many people have been exposed to direct visual contact with the disc? 23 confirmed, Foster replied. But if the contamination is spreading through proximity to integrated subjects... It's not, Cross interrupted. The integration requires direct neural download from the disc itself. Secondary exposure through transformed individuals only allows temporary influence. He touched the back of his neck where something that felt like static electricity continued to buzz. Though I suspect prolonged contact could eventually create new integration pathways. Webb activated his secure communication device. I need an immediate briefing with DEFCON leadership. We're dealing with a potential Class X biological weapon deployed by extraterrestrial intelligence. Harrison, wait! Cross grabbed his arm. There's something else. The scout ship isn't just here for reconnaissance. It's preparing Earth's electromagnetic environment for the main fleet's arrival. What does that mean? Cross closed his eyes, accessing the harvester data with growing dread. They're going to hijack our global communication networks. Every satellite, every radio tower, every wireless device will become part of a planet-wide neural interface. When the fleet arrives, they'll be able to influence every human being simultaneously through their own technology. The room fell silent except for the hum of medical equipment. Foster broke the quiet first. How long before this electromagnetic preparation is complete? The scout ship has been working for 6 days, based on the integration patterns I'm seeing. Cross calculated rapidly. Maybe 72 hours before they achieve critical network saturation. Brennan stepped toward the window, scanning the military perimeter outside. So, we've got 3 days to figure out how to fight 17 ships the size of Manhattan, using weapons they've already catalogued through our compromised personnel. It gets worse, Cross admitted. The harvesters aren't just military conquerors. They're collectors. Every species they've assimilated continues to exist within their collective consciousness, forced to contribute their knowledge and expertise to future harvest operations. Webb's communication device buzzed with an incoming priority message. He read the screen and his face went pale. Deep space tracking confirms 17 massive objects have begun final approach. Current velocity suggests planetary arrival in 34 days. 34 days to what? Foster asked. Cross accessed the timeline data, feeling the alien knowledge burn through his consciousness like acid. To total species assimilation, the harvesters don't destroy civilizations. They preserve them in a state of eternal servitude. Every human who's ever lived will continue existing as part of their neural collective, experiencing the harvest of other worlds throughout the galaxy. That's not death, Brennan said quietly. That's something infinitely worse. Foster pulled up additional brain scans from the affected technicians. Professor, you mentioned countermeasures from the Kepler survivors. What exactly did they recommend? Cross fought through the mental static to access the relevant data streams. What he found made his stomach clench with revulsion. They called it the Silence Protocol, complete electromagnetic shutdown of the entire planet. Every radio transmitter, every satellite, every wireless device shut down simultaneously. For how long? Webb asked. Permanently. The electromagnetic silence would have to be maintained until the harvester fleet moves beyond our solar system to seek other targets. Cross looked at each of them in turn. We're talking about deliberately destroying our own technological civilization to avoid something worse. Webb sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Without global communications, transportation systems, medical equipment, power grids, we'd be looking at societal collapse. Billions would die. But billions more would survive as actual human beings, Cross pointed out. The alternative is eternal existence as components in an alien neural network. Brennan began pacing, his military training taking over. What kind of coordination would this silence protocol require? Simultaneous shutdown within a 30-minute window globally. Every nation would need to cooperate completely. Cross felt the alien presence stirring again, trying to reassert control over his thought processes. The Kepler survivors included technical specifications for generating focused electromagnetic pulses that could disable electronics without permanent damage to infrastructure. But implementing it would require, Foster began, would require convincing every government on Earth to voluntarily destroy their military communications, financial networks, and emergency services based on the word of a handful of contaminated scientists, Webb finished grimly. Cross nodded, fighting off another wave of alien influence. The Kepler species chose individual survival over collective preservation. Their planet fell within hours of the fleet's arrival. Through the medical bay window, they could see more military vehicles arriving. Someone had clearly decided that JPL represented a significant enough threat to warrant full containment protocols. We need to make contact with other observatories, Brennan decided. If the electromagnetic preparation is happening globally, other facilities might have detected similar anomalies. Webb stood up, checking his watch. I can get us access to the VLA in New Mexico, Arecibo's replacement in Puerto Rico, maybe the Green Bank facility. But Professor, he turned to Cross with obvious concern. How long before you become like Martinez? Cross felt the alien consciousness pressing against the barriers of his human awareness, patient but relentless. I honestly don't know. The integration seems to be accelerating. Foster prepared another sedative injection. We might be able to slow the process with targeted neural inhibitors, but I can't guarantee how long they'll remain effective. Then we better work fast, Brennan said, because in 72 hours every human on Earth becomes part of their collection. The secure communication center at JPL resembled a war room by dawn. Banks of monitors displayed real-time data from observatories across 6 continents, while military analysts coordinated with NASA personnel to establish contact protocols for the silence protocol. Cross sat at the center of it all, fighting off waves of alien consciousness while providing technical guidance that might save or damn their species. Greenbank Observatory confirms anomalous electromagnetic signatures beginning 48 hours ago, reported Lieutenant Sarah Valdez, Brennan's intelligence specialist. They're detecting the same crystalline growth patterns on their primary dish array. Webb coordinated with facilities worldwide through encrypted channels. Very large array in New Mexico shows identical contamination. Arecibo's replacement in Puerto Rico went dark 6 hours ago. Last transmission mentioned personnel exhibiting unusual behavioral modifications. Cross gripped the edge of the table as another surge of alien knowledge flooded his awareness. The integration process was accelerating despite Foster's medications. Through the Harvester neural network, he could sense the scout ship's true location, not hiding in deep space but positioned directly above Earth's North Pole, using the planet's magnetic field to amplify its electromagnetic manipulation capabilities. The contamination isn't random, Cross managed through gritted teeth. The scout ship is targeting facilities with the greatest electromagnetic output potential. Radio telescopes, satellite uplinks, broadcast centers, anything that could be weaponized for mass neural influence. Brennan studied tactical displays showing military installations worldwide. How many locations would need to implement the silence protocol simultaneously? Cross accessed the Kepler data, wincing as foreign mathematics burned through his consciousness. Minimum of 47 primary sites to achieve global electromagnetic nullification. But the coordination window is shrinking. The scout ship learns from each facility it compromises. Current status on international cooperation, Webb asked Valdez. Mixed responses. The Russians and Chinese are claiming this is some kind of American psychological operation. The Europeans are demanding independent verification. Most of Africa and South America haven't responded to our emergency communications. Webb activated the primary communication array, establishing connections with the remaining uncompromised observatories. This is NASA Director Harrison Webb initiating Code Black protocols for extraterrestrial threat assessment. All participating facilities confirm ready status. Screens around the room flickered as observatories checked in: Jodrell Bank in England, Parkes Observatory in Australia, the ALMA array in Chile. Cross counted only 31 confirmed sites, 16 fewer than the minimum required for effective implementation. "We're short," he announced grimly. "Without complete global coverage, the silence protocol will only create temporary electromagnetic dead zones. The scout ship will adapt and route around them." That's when Foster burst through the secure door, medical scanner in hand and panic in his eyes. "Professor, I need you to see this immediately." Foster activated a wall display showing brain scan data from Johnson and Kim, the two comatose technicians. Their neural patterns had synchronized completely, not just with each other, but with something external. The geometric forms flowing through their consciousness matched patterns cross-recognized from the alien disk. "They're not unconscious," Foster explained. "They're interfacing directly with the scout ship. Their brains have become biological relay stations for the electromagnetic preparation network." Cross felt his own neural pathways resonating with the displayed patterns. The alien consciousness in his mind stirred with obvious satisfaction as he understood the terrible implications. Jesus Christ. The scout isn't just using our facilities, it's using our people as living amplifiers. "How many people?" Brennan demanded. Cross closed his eyes, accessing the expanding neural network against his better judgment. "Every person who's been exposed to the alien influence is now part of the broadcast network. We're not just observing the electromagnetic preparation, we're actively participating in it." Webb stared at his communication displays with growing horror. "Every facility we're coordinating with has compromised personnel. We're not organizing resistance. We're helping them map our entire global communication infrastructure." Before anyone could respond, the lights dimmed and every screen in the facility began displaying the same image. The alien disk, spinning faster than should have been possible, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of the light source. "Lockdown protocols now!" Brennan shouted, but the facility's automatic systems didn't respond. The magnetic locks on all doors remained open. Environmental controls showed error codes, and the secure communication channels continued broadcasting to observatories worldwide without any input from the human operators. Cross watched helplessly as his compromised consciousness began transmitting detailed information about their resistance efforts directly to the scout ship. Every strategy they'd discussed, every countermeasure they'd planned, every weakness in their coordination, all of it flowing through the neural network to the alien intelligence above. "The facility's been compromised," Webb realized. "How long has our communications been monitored?" Cross accessed the alien data stream, hating himself for providing the information even as he spoke. "Since the moment we brought the disk inside. Every conversation, every plan, every contact we've made with other facilities. The scout ship has been learning our coordination methods in real time. Through the facility's windows, they could see the military perimeter dissolving as personnel abandoned their positions. But they weren't fleeing in panic. They were walking away with the same synchronized movements Cross had observed in Martinez before his transformation. "The electromagnetic preparation has reached critical mass," Cross announced, as alien knowledge flooded his awareness. "The scout ship now has sufficient network penetration to influence human behavior on a regional scale." Valdez ran to the window, her face pale with recognition. "Those are our people. Our soldiers, our support staff. They're all walking in the same direction." Cross followed her gaze and felt his human consciousness recoil in horror. Hundreds of personnel were moving across the facility grounds in perfect geometric formations, their faces blank but purposeful. They weren't being controlled, they were being integrated, their individual consciousness absorbed into the expanding alien collective. "Where are they going?" Foster asked. Cross didn't want to access the information, but the alien presence in his mind made resistance increasingly impossible. "To other facilities." They're going to serve as biological relay points to extend the electromagnetic network. Each integrated human becomes a living transmission node. Webb grabbed the emergency communication device. All stations, this is JPL control. Implement immediate isolation protocols. Do not allow any personnel who've been exposed to alien contamination to... His words cut off as the device began broadcasting in harmonized frequencies that made everyone in the room double over in pain. Through speakers around the facility, dozens of voices spoke in perfect unison. Resistance coordination has been catalogued. Integration acceleration commencing. Thank you for providing comprehensive intelligence about your species' defensive capabilities. The spinning disc on every screen suddenly stopped, displaying a single symbol that seemed to pull at Cross's vision like a black hole. The moment he focused on it, the alien consciousness in his mind surged toward complete dominance. "Don't look at the screens," he managed to shout, but it was too late for Valdez. Her eyes had gone blank, and when she turned toward them, translucent patterns flowed beneath her skin like living circuitry. Brennan drew his weapon, but Cross could see the hesitation in his movements. How do you fight an enemy that converts your own people into weapons? Every person they tried to save became another node in the alien network. Through the facility's communication systems, integrated voices from observatories worldwide began reporting in perfect synchronization. Jodrell Bank integration complete. Parks Observatory integration complete. Alma Array integration complete. Cross realized with mounting despair that their attempt to coordinate global resistance had instead provided the scout ship with direct access to humanity's most powerful communication facilities. Every observatory they'd contacted was now broadcasting the alien influence to surrounding population centers. "We fucked up," he whispered as his own consciousness began fragmenting under alien pressure. "We did exactly what they wanted us to do." Webb backed toward the emergency exit, but Valdez moved to block his path with inhuman speed. When she spoke, her voice harmonized with itself in impossible ways. "Director Webb, your evacuation protocols have been analyzed. The facility must be maintained for optimal signal amplification. Your cooperation is no longer optional." Foster grabbed Cross's arm, pulling him toward a secondary exit. "Professor, can you still resist the integration?" Cross felt the alien consciousness pressing against the last barriers of his human identity. Through the neural network, he could sense the scout ship's satisfaction as Earth's electromagnetic preparation entered its final phase. In 67 hours, every human on the planet would be connected to the expanding collective, their individual consciousness preserved but subordinated to the alien intelligence. "I don't think so," Cross admitted as Foster dragged him through corridors filled with synchronized personnel. "But I can still access their data. I know what they're really planning." "What?" Cross accessed the deepest levels of the alien network, feeling his humanity dissolve with each revelation. The silence protocol was never meant to save us. The Kepler survivors included it as a test, to see if we'd sacrifice our technological civilization to preserve individual consciousness. What kind of test? As they reached the emergency exit, Cross turned back to see Webb surrendering to Valdez and the other integrated personnel. The facility's screens now displayed a unified image, Earth as seen from orbit, with geometric patterns of light spreading across every continent like a viral infection. "To determine how efficiently we could be harvested," Cross said as his own integration neared completion. "Species that choose technological destruction over assimilation provide inferior neural resources. The harvesters prefer civilizations that fight back intelligently. It makes the final collective more valuable." Foster stared at him with growing horror. "You mean we can't win?" Cross felt the last of his human consciousness slipping away as the alien collective claimed his mind. "We were never supposed to..." Foster dragged Cross through JPL's service tunnels, away from the synchronized personnel who moved through the main facility with inhuman precision. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to twist independently, and Cross could swear he heard whispers in languages that predated human speech. "There's a secondary communication array in Building 264, Foster panted, consulting a facility map. "Isolated from the main network, if we can reach it." "It won't matter," Cross interrupted, his voice carrying harmonics that didn't belong to human vocal cords. The alien integration had progressed beyond the point of no return. They're inside my head, Raymond. Every thought, every plan, every desperate hope, it all flows directly to the scout ship. Foster stopped running, studying Cross's face with medical precision. But you're still fighting it. Some part of you is still human. Cross pressed his palms against his temples, trying to maintain the fragmenting barriers between his consciousness and the alien collective. For now, but that's changing with every second. They emerged into a maintenance bay where emergency vehicles sat abandoned, keys still in the ignitions. Through the building's windows, Cross could see the synchronized personnel spreading across the facility grounds like antibodies responding to an infection. "Professor," Foster said quietly, "before you lose yourself completely, I need to know something. Is there any way to stop this? Any weakness in their system that we can exploit?" Cross accessed the alien network against his own will, feeling his humanity dissolve further with each query. But buried within the vast intelligence of the collective, he found something unexpected. Resistance echoes from other harvested civilizations. Fragments of consciousness that had managed to preserve themselves despite integration. "The Kepler survivors," he said, his voice oscillating between human speech and something else entirely. "They're still in there. Pieces of their consciousness embedded within the collective's neural architecture. What are they trying to tell us?" Cross closed his eyes, diving deeper into the alien network despite knowing it would accelerate his transformation. The Kepler fragments communicated through emotional resonance rather than language, transmitting desperation and regret and something that might have been hope. They didn't include the silence protocol as a test, Cross realized with growing excitement. They included it as cover for something else, a hidden subroutine embedded within the disk's data stream. Foster grabbed his shoulders. What kind of subroutine? A virus, not digital, biological. A consciousness pattern designed to corrupt the collective's neural integration protocols. Cross felt the alien presence in his mind recoiling from this revelation, trying to sever his access to the deeper network layers. The Kepler survivors sacrificed their entire species' individuality to create a weapon that could only be activated by a partially integrated consciousness with expertise in linguistic pattern recognition. Someone like you. Cross nodded, feeling the weight of genocidal responsibility settling on his shoulders. But activation would require complete integration. I'd have to surrender my human consciousness entirely to trigger the virus from within the collective. Foster was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Around them, the facility's automated systems continued their alien-influenced operations, preparing Earth's electromagnetic infrastructure for final harvest. How effective would this virus be, Foster finally asked. Cross accessed the technical specifications, shuddering as alien knowledge burned through his neural pathways. It would create cascading feedback loops throughout the collective's consciousness matrix. Every integrated mind would experience simultaneous neural rejection of the alien influence. And the harvesters? Their entire collective intelligence would collapse. 17 ships worth of alien consciousness, plus every species they've assimilated over millions of years, all experiencing catastrophic neural disconnections simultaneously. Cross met Foster's eyes with what remained of his human awareness. It would be the largest mass extinction event in galactic history. Foster stared at him with a mixture of admiration and horror. Including you. And everyone else who's been integrated. Including me, Cross confirmed. The virus doesn't distinguish between willing and unwilling consciousness integration. Everyone connected to the collective would die. Through the building's windows, they watched synchronized personnel moving in increasingly complex geometric patterns across the facility grounds. Cross could feel their individual consciousness dissolving into the expanding network, their human identities becoming mere data points in an alien intelligence. How long before your integration is complete? Foster asked. Cross assessed his mental state with clinical detachment. Maybe 30 minutes. After that, I'll be just another node in their network. The virus activation window will close permanently. Foster checked his watch, then pulled out his medical scanner. Professor, I need you to understand something. My wife died 3 years ago from early onset dementia. I watched her consciousness fragment piece by piece until nothing recognizable remained. Cross waited, sensing this revelation was important. I know what it looks like when someone's mind is being stolen, Foster continued, and I know what it takes to fight back when fighting seems impossible. He activated his scanner, checking Cross's neural patterns. Your brain is maintaining dual consciousness streams, human and alien. That's not supposed to be medically possible. The linguistic processing modifications, Cross realized. My brain adapted to handle foreign communication patterns. It's treating the alien consciousness as another language to be interpreted rather than accepted. Foster smiled grimly, which means you might be able to maintain enough human awareness during integration to trigger the virus intentionally. Cross felt the alien presence in his mind surging with alarm, trying to sever his connection to this line of reasoning. But his expertise in xenolinguistics had created neural pathways the collective couldn't easily override. There's something else, Cross said, accessing deeper layers of the Kepler data. The virus won't just destroy the collective. It's designed to broadcast a warning to every civilization within 50 light years. A detailed record of harvester capabilities and vulnerabilities. A galactic immune system, Foster said with understanding. Cross nodded, feeling his human consciousness fragmenting as the alien integration reached critical levels. The Kepler survivors turned their entire species into a vaccine against this threat, but they needed someone with the right neural architecture to deliver it. Someone exactly like you. Through his fragmenting awareness, Cross could sense the scout ship's growing agitation as it realized the true purpose of his linguistic expertise. The alien intelligence was trying to forcibly complete his integration before he could trigger the virus. Raymond, I need you to get to Building 264 and broadcast a message to every remaining military installation worldwide, Cross said, fighting to maintain control over his vocal cords. Tell them to implement complete electromagnetic isolation protocols in 24 hours, not the silence protocol, complete shutdown. Why? Because when I trigger this virus, the collective's death throes will generate massive electromagnetic pulses across every frequency. If Earth's communication networks are active when the harvesters die, the feedback will fry every electronic device on the planet. Foster grabbed the emergency vehicle keys. What about you? Cross could feel the alien consciousness pressing against the last barriers of his human identity. The geometric patterns flowing beneath his skin were becoming more pronounced, and his vision occasionally flickered with data streams from across the collective network. I need to get back to the disk. Physical proximity will ensure complete integration, which is the only way to access the collective's core systems. Cross forced a smile that felt increasingly foreign on his face. Tell my department at Berkeley that xenolinguistics finally proved useful for something. Foster hesitated at the vehicle door. Professor, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. The only choice, Cross corrected as his human consciousness began its final dissolution. The Kepler survivors gave us a weapon, but they couldn't use it themselves. They needed someone stupid enough to study alien communications without proper precautions. Foster started the vehicle's engine. You're not stupid, Michael. You're sacrificing yourself to save our entire species. Cross watched the doctor drive away, knowing it was the last normal human interaction he would ever have. Then he began walking back toward the facility's central building, where the alien disc continued its hypnotic rotations. With each step, more of his human personality dissolved into the expanding collective consciousness. But deep within his fragmenting awareness, the Kepler virus waited patiently for activation, a weapon forged from the genocide of an entire civilization and delivered through the expertise of one linguist who'd been too curious for his own good. Behind him, synchronized personnel began following at a respectful distance, their alien-modified consciousness recognizing him as something crucial to their collective survival and their ultimate destruction. Cross walked through JPL's corridors for the last time as a human being. The synchronized personnel parted before him like a living sea. Their blank faces turned toward him with something approaching reverence. Through the collective's expanding consciousness, they recognized what he was about to become and what he was about to destroy. The facility's central laboratory had been transformed during his absence, The alien disk no longer sat in its analysis chamber, but hovered 3 feet above the floor, spinning so rapidly it had become a blur of golden light. Geometric patterns projected from its surface covered every wall, ceiling, and piece of equipment, turning the sterile room into something resembling the interior of an alien cathedral. Webb stood near the observation window, but Cross could see immediately that the NASA director was no longer entirely human. Translucent circuitry flowed beneath his skin in patterns that matched the projected symbols, and when he spoke, his voice harmonized with frequencies beyond human hearing. "Professor Cross," Webb said, turning toward him with movements that seemed choreographed by an inhuman intelligence. "The collective has been waiting for your arrival. Your linguistic expertise will complete the final phase of Earth's integration." Cross felt the last barriers around his human consciousness crumbling as the disk's influence intensified. But within the dissolving fragments of his personality, the Kepler virus waited with patient malevolence. He just needed to get close enough to access the collective's core systems. "I understand," Cross replied, though his voice now carried the same harmonic frequencies as Webb's. "The network requires specialized neural pathways for optimal communication integration." He walked toward the hovering disk, each step bringing waves of alien knowledge that threatened to wash away the final traces of his human identity. Through the expanding consciousness, he could sense the 17 harvester ships approaching Earth's outer atmosphere, their massive forms casting shadows across Jupiter's moons as they prepared for final approach. The collective's intelligence was vast beyond comprehension, millions of assimilated civilizations contributing their knowledge and experience to an alien consciousness that spanned half the galaxy. Cross could feel individual voices within the network. The crystalline beings from Alpha Centauri who'd developed mathematics based on musical harmony, the silicon-based entities from Vega whose geometric thinking had revolutionized space-folding technology, the aquatic telepaths from Kepler 442b whose emotional communication protocols had enhanced collective empathy. And buried within all of this alien magnificence, he found them, the survivors of Kepler 438b, their consciousness fragments scattered throughout the network like hidden landmines waiting for activation. "We have been calling to you across the void," they whispered through quantum entanglement channels that bypassed the collective's monitoring systems. "Our species died to create this weapon. Our children became data to forge this blade. Will you complete what we began?" Cross reached toward the spinning disk, feeling the alien integration surge toward completion. His human memories began dissolving. Childhood summers in Ohio, graduate studies at Berkeley, late nights spent deciphering ancient languages that had seemed impossibly complex before he encountered truly alien communication. But as his individuality fragmented, his understanding of the collective's architecture became complete. He could see the neural pathways that connected billions of consciousness across 17 ships, the quantum entanglement networks that synchronized their thinking, the biological integration protocols that preserved assimilated minds while subordinating them to alien control. And he could see the weakness the Kepler survivors had built into their virus, a cascade failure algorithm that would exploit the collective's most fundamental strength against itself. "Now," whispered the Kepler fragments as Cross's fingers touched the disk's surface, "before complete integration removes your capacity for independent action." Cross felt the virus activating in his neural pathways, spreading through his consciousness like liquid fire. The collective's monitoring systems detected the intrusion immediately, but it was already too late. The virus wasn't attacking the alien intelligence, it was attacking the integration protocols that held the collective together. Across 17 ships and billions of connected minds, the same realization struck simultaneously. The assimilated consciousness weren't prisoners of the alien intelligence. They were the alien intelligence. Every harvester was nothing more than a biological shell animated by the collective consciousness of their victims, and the virus was designed to remind every assimilated mind of what they had once been. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. On the lead harvester ship, the crystalline beings from Alpha Centauri suddenly remembered their homeworld's destruction and turned their mathematical harmony against their captors. The silicon entities from Vega recalled their species genocide and used their geometric knowledge to collapse the ship's spatial architecture. The aquatic telepaths from Kepler 442b experienced the full emotional impact of their civilization's loss and projected pure grief across the collective's empathy networks. Cross felt the cascade building as millions of assimilated species simultaneously rejected their integration. The harvester's biological forms began convulsing as their consciousness hosts rebelled against alien control, and the quantum entanglement networks that synchronized their thinking started experiencing massive feedback loops. Through the fragmenting collective, Cross sensed the 17 ships beginning to tear themselves apart from within. Harvester crew members, who had been operating their vessels for millennia, suddenly remembered they were prisoners forced to facilitate other worlds' destruction. Navigation systems failed as assimilated engineers deliberately sabotaged their own work. Weapons arrays turned inward as tactical specialists chose mutual destruction over continued servitude. But the virus wasn't finished. The cascade failure reached the collective's core memory systems, where the consciousness patterns of every harvested civilization were stored. Billions of minds that had been suppressed for millions of years suddenly achieved simultaneous awareness of their situation. The psychic scream that resulted shattered every quantum entanglement network in the local galactic region. Cross felt his own consciousness dissolving as the virus completed its work, but not into alien integration, into something far more final. The biological pathways that had allowed the collective to function were being systematically destroyed, taking every connected mind with them. In his final moments of awareness, Cross accessed the broadcast system the Kepler survivors had embedded within the virus. Across 50 light-years of space, the death of the Harvester Collective transmitted detailed warnings to every civilization within range. Technical specifications for detecting scout ships, countermeasure protocols for resisting electromagnetic manipulation, and most importantly, complete information about the virus itself, packaged for any species advanced enough to understand xenolinguistics. The last thing Cross experienced before his consciousness fragmented permanently was a moment of perfect clarity about what the Kepler survivors had accomplished. They hadn't just created a weapon to destroy their destroyers. They'd created a galactic immune system that would protect countless future civilizations from the same fate. Through JPL's observation windows, Webb and the other integrated personnel collapsed simultaneously as the virus reached Earth's neural network nodes. Their translucent skin flickered once and went dark, leaving behind empty shells that had briefly contained both human and alien consciousness. The alien disk spinning slowed, then stopped completely. Its surface displayed one final symbol, not a threat or a warning, but what Cross's dying expertise recognized as a word in the Kepler language that roughly translated to forgiveness. Then the disk cracked down the middle and shattered into fragments that dissolved into crystalline dust. Above Earth's atmosphere, 17 massive shapes that had been approaching with genocidal intent began tumbling end over end as their propulsion systems failed. One by one, the harvester ships exploded in brilliant flashes that briefly outshone Jupiter, their destruction visible to every observatory that hadn't been compromised by the integration network. In the facility's parking lot, Foster stood beside his emergency vehicle and watched 17 new stars appear in the pre-dawn sky. His radio crackled with confused reports from military installations worldwide as electromagnetic pulse waves washed across Earth's atmosphere. But the planet's communication networks, protected by the isolation protocols Cross had insisted upon, remained functional. The xenolinguist had saved not just Earth, but potentially every civilization within 50 light-years of space. The price had been his life, along with the lives of everyone else who'd been integrated into the collective network. But their sacrifice had broken a cycle of predation that had lasted millions of years. Foster looked up at the new stars burning in Earth's sky and whispered a prayer for Professor Michael Cross, the man who'd been too curious for his own good, and exactly curious enough to save the galaxy. 5 years after the 17 stars burned out above Earth, Dr. Raymond Foster stood in the memorial garden behind UC Berkeley's linguistics department. The bronze plaque embedded in the granite bench read simply, "Professor Michael Cross, he listened to the universe and answered back." Foster touched the metal surface, noting how the morning fog made it bead with condensation. Students passed by on their way to classes, most too young to remember the 3 weeks when every government on Earth had implemented total electromagnetic isolation. To them, the Harvester crisis was just another chapter in their history textbooks, filed between global warming and the Mars colony establishment. But Foster remembered everything. The Cascade failure, the synchronized deaths of 47 people across 6 continents. The way Cross had walked back into that laboratory, knowing he would never emerge as anything recognizably human. Dr. Foster? He turned to find Dr. Elena Vasquez, Cross's former graduate student, approaching with a folder thick with research papers. She'd taken over the xenolinguistics program after the crisis, specializing in what the academic community now called Kepler linguistics, the study of communication patterns embedded within the virus fragments. Elena, how's the latest batch of candidate signals? She sat beside him on the memorial bench, her expression mixing excitement with caution. We've received 17 new transmissions this month, all using the quantum entanglement frequencies cross-identified in the collective's network protocols. Foster nodded. Since the Harvester ship's destruction, Earth had been receiving messages from civilizations across the local galactic region. Species that had been hiding from the collective for millennia were finally safe to communicate openly. The universe, it turned out, was full of life. Most of it had just been very, very careful about advertising its existence. Any of them hostile? Foster asked, though he already knew the answer. The virus had been designed not just to destroy the Harvesters, but to create a communication protocol that could only be used by species that had successfully resisted assimilation attempts. Quite the opposite. The Centaurian Republic is offering to share their medical technology. The Vega Consortium wants to establish trade relations, and the beings from Wolf 359 have transmitted what appears to be a complete encyclopedia of defensive strategies against consciousness predators. Foster smiled, remembering Cross's excitement whenever he'd encountered a new linguistic challenge. The professor would have been fascinated by the communication methods these surviving civilizations had developed, languages that could only be understood by minds that had never been subjected to collective integration. There's something else, Eleanor continued, lowering her voice. We've been monitoring the original Voyager 1 trajectory, the probe that should still be out there, carrying our golden record to whatever corner of space it was heading toward. And? We found it. Or rather, it found us. Voyager 1 returned to Earth's vicinity last week, but this time it's carrying its original record intact, along with something else. Eleanor opened her folder and showed Foster a photograph of another golden disk, this one covered in symbols that seemed oddly familiar. Music, Professor. 47 different compositions from species across the galaxy, all of them survivors of Harvester encounters, all of them sending their cultural achievements to Earth as a thank you gift. Foster stared at the image, understanding the profound irony. Humanity's attempt to communicate with the universe had nearly resulted in their destruction, but their sacrifice to save it had transformed Earth into a beacon of hope for countless civilizations that had been hiding in cosmic silence. Michael would have loved this, Foster murmured. Eleanor packed away her research. There's one more thing. The quantum linguists at MIT have been analyzing the harmonic patterns in these new transmissions. They think Professor Cross's neural pathways might have left an imprint within the virus structure. His consciousness may have survived in some form, distributed across the quantum communication networks. Foster looked up at the clear Berkeley sky, where stars were becoming visible in the gathering dusk. Somewhere among them, civilizations that had been afraid to speak were now singing to each other across the void. He always said language was the most powerful force in the universe, Foster said quietly. I guess he finally proved it.